when my superior said, "Don't stop, keep the convoy moving." I did what I always did, obeyed, until I saw the woman and the child standing in the snow, motionless, like they'd already given up. For years I'd been told compassion makes you weak. My ex-husband said it when he left me for someone less burdened by feelings. My own father said it the day he saluted my promotion and whispered, "Don't let your heart ruin your command." That night, the heart they told me to bury refused to stay quiet. I broke the order. I stopped. And I had no idea that small act, just one moment of disobedience, would expose every lie I'd ever believed about strength, honor, and who I really was. My name is Heather Young, and this is the night I learned that mercy has consequences. The road ahead was nothing but white and silence. Ice clawed at the tires. Wind screamed against the steel, and every order on the radio sounded colder than the air outside. We were told to keep moving, no stops, no exceptions. Through the blur of snow, two dark shapes appeared near a wrecked truck, a woman and a child, standing perfectly still. They weren't waving, weren't calling for help, just waiting for whatever came next. For a moment, I thought fatigue was tricking me, until the boy's eyes caught mine. Too wide, too quiet. "Stop," I said. Jenkins stiffened at the wheel. "Ma'am, that's an order we don't break." "I'll take it," I answered. The brakes screamed. I stepped into the storm, my face burning from the wind. The woman's scarf was frozen stiff. The boy's coat hung off his shoulders. I handed her the last ration pack and wrapped a blanket around them. She tried to speak, but could only nod. Her hand found mine, ice cold, shaking, but steady. I whispered, "Stay by the trees. Someone will come." Back in the cab, Jenkins didn't look at me. Neither of us spoke as the engines groaned forward. The snow swallowed them behind us, and I didn't know then that one small act of disobedience had already begun to change everything. 3 days after the storm, the snow stopped falling, but the air inside the base turned colder. It wasn't the kind of cold that crept through your boots. It was the kind that slipped into people's voices, into the silence between footsteps. Rumors spread faster than the wind outside. Someone had broken convoy protocol near Checkpoint Delta. I didn't need anyone to say the name. I already knew it was me. Every time I stepped into the operations tent, conversations cut short, heads bent lower. One young lieutenant leaned toward his friend and muttered that this is what happens when you let emotion lead command. I kept walking, pretending not to hear, though the words landed like gravel under my ribs. After all these years, I'd learned how to keep my face still while something inside me cracked. That night, I sat alone in my tent, the coffee on the table long gone cold. The lamp flickered in the draft as I opened my notebook and wrote, "When did following orders start to feel like betrayal?" I tried not to picture the woman and the child, but their faces had settled somewhere behind my eyelids. The boy's hesitant hunger, the mother's trembling hand still gripping mine. Morning brought a formal letter, internal review. My pulse didn't even rise. The name on the report stopped me, Lieutenant Simons, one of my first trainees. I'd once told him to lead with integrity. Now he'd filed a complaint, anonymous but sloppy, his signature still printed in the margins. He called it a logistical violation. I called it survival. Jenkins came in quietly, set a cup of coffee beside me, and didn't meet my eyes. "You're not alone, ma'am," he said softly. I smiled faintly. "We all are, Jenkins, especially when we do the right thing." The administrative wing reeked of diesel and old metal. The walls carried echoes, doors closing, boots striking tile, the muffled hum of a machine that never rested. Inside the small room, there was only a wooden table, 2 chairs, and the man I'd seen once before from a distance, Major General Marcus Kane. He looked up as I entered, sleeves rolled, medals absent, the kind of authority that didn't need shine to be heavy. His tone was steady, his expression unreadable. "Captain Young, the report states an unscheduled stop 2 nights ago." "Is that true?" "It is. You broke orders to assist civilians. I followed the only order that still makes sense, to serve. He studied me in silence, then asked, "Why did you stop?" A woman and a child. They were freezing. His eyes flickered. Not surprise, something else. He picked up a pen. "Where exactly?" I gave him the coordinates. He wrote them down slowly, every number deliberate. "Thank you," he said, and the steel in his voice softened. Just barely. I braced for the reprimand, but it never came. Instead, he leaned back, watching me like a man seeing something he couldn't name. "Sometimes mercy costs less than you think," he said quietly, then dismissed me without a file, without a word more. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lamp burned low, wind scraping the canvas like fingernails. His voice kept circling my thoughts, that single strange sentence, and his eyes, sharp but hollow, like a man haunted by his own memory. At dawn, Jenkins came in with news whispered from a tech and communications. General Kane's family convoy went missing that same night. The words hit harder than any accusation. My hands went cold, my pulse stilled. It couldn't be. Could it? The woman, the child in the snow. The coffee spilled from my hand, spreading across the table like a shadow I couldn't wipe away. Rumors spread faster than any winter storm. The snow outside had stopped, but inside the base, the air turned sharp with suspicion. Every time I walked into the mess hall, conversations froze mid-sentence. No one said my name, but their glances finished the thought for them. She broke convoy law for strangers. That's what emotion does to old soldiers. I didn't answer. Silence had become my only armor. Jenkins stayed near, quiet as ever, bringing me coffee he knew I'd barely touch. That night, as the wind clawed at the windows, he said softly that I'd done the right thing, that some of them had just forgotten what that meant. I stared out at the snow pressed against the glass, wondering if the people I'd stopped for were still alive. I wasn't afraid of punishment anymore. I was afraid that my defiance had meant nothing. 2 days later, Jenkins came to me pale and tense. A radio tech had whispered something he couldn't shake. "General Kane's family convoy went missing the same night you stopped." My pen stopped in mid-sentence. Kane's question echoed through my head. "Where exactly did you stop?" And the strange weight in his eyes when he said mercy costs less than you think. He hadn't been testing me. He'd been terrified. I realized the man who'd interrogated me might have lost the only thing that still made him human. That night, I wrote a letter I never sent. If compassion costs me my career, it's still cheaper than losing my soul. 3 mornings later, the base was spotless, flags polished, guards alert. Word came of distinguished visitors. I ignored it until Jenkins burst in. Breathless, my name was on the meeting list. When I reached headquarters, the guard simply said, "General Kane's waiting for you." I stepped into warmth and heard a sound that didn't belong in a command room. A child's laugh. Kane stood behind his desk. Beside him, a woman with the same scarf I'd once wrapped around her shoulders, and a small boy whose eyes I'd never forgotten. The world narrowed to the 3 of us. The boy approached, holding out a battered lighter. "You gave us warm." His mother, Anna, whispered. "Many saw us, only you stopped." Kane's voice broke its usual precision. "Captain, you didn't just stop for civilians. You saved my wife and son." I tried to speak, but no sound came. He went on, saying he'd thought them dead for 36 hours until my report reached him. I whispered that I hadn't known who they were. I just stopped. He nodded. "Exactly. That's why it matters." The boy pressed the lighter into my palm. Soldier gave me hope. The metal felt heavier than any metal I'd ever earned. "Before I left," Kane said quietly, "there'd be a ceremony in Brussels next week. Not a punishment, a reminder. And somehow, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Brussels was wrapped in fog when I arrived, the kind that hides everything except what you're running from. My uniform was worn at the shoulders, its edges softened by years of dust and orders. I thought I'd been called here to be an example. to stand alone before a room of officers and be reminded that rules matter more than mercy. At my age, the only thing I still feared losing was dignity. The NATO hall glittered in sterile perfection. Flags lined the walls, silver crests gleamed, and 1,000 shoes tapped against marble floors that smelled of polish and ceremony. A young aide whispered that I should sit near the back. I obeyed. The murmurs stilled when General Marcus Kane stepped up to the podium. He looked different, less like the machine I'd met in interrogation, more like a man carrying the weight of something he could never fix. His voice filled the room, steady but raw. 2 weeks ago, a convoy officer made a decision. It broke regulations, but preserved something far rarer: humanity. My pulse stumbled. Was he talking about me or someone else? Then came my name, Captain Heather Young, front and center. As I rose, I heard the clinking of metals, the low rustle of curiosity. She's the one. That's her. My legs moved, but the rest of me stayed frozen. When I stopped before him, he met my eyes and turned to the audience. "Gentlemen, meet my wife." The air vanished. From the first row, the woman I had covered with a blanket stepped forward, her scarf clean, her face no longer pale. The child beside her saluted, proud and trembling. The room stood still. No applause, no whispers, just the quiet weight of something sacred. Kane opened a velvet case and pinned a medal to my chest. His voice cracked as he said that I hadn't just saved his family. I'd reminded him that command without compassion is nothing but control. The hall erupted in applause, but I only heard my own breath, uneven and warm for the first time in years. As I turned to leave the stage, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You saved them, Captain, but you also saved a part of me I thought was gone." And in that moment, the lights of Brussels blurred into the snow of that long night, and I realized warmth can outlast even winter. After the ceremony, I thought it was over, but endings rarely announce themselves. A message came that evening. General Kane wanted to see me privately. No guards, no aides, no audience. Just 2 cups of coffee, steam curling through the dim light of his office. He spoke first, quieter than I'd ever heard him. "When I saw your report, I thought you were reckless. Then I learned who you'd stopped for. I told him it hadn't been about them. I stopped because of me." His brow furrowed. "Because of you." I nodded. "I once lost a child," I said. "I couldn't watch another one die." Silence. He didn't move, didn't speak, the kind of stillness that makes truth heavier. Finally, he exhaled. "I ordered my soldiers to keep moving that night. My own convoy was among them. I followed the rules and almost buried my family because of it." He reached into his desk and slid a folded paper toward me. A resignation letter. "I'm requesting early retirement," he said, "joining NATO's humanitarian division." I tried to protest, but he shook his head. "You reminded me what leadership means." Then he stood, saluted, not as a superior, but as a soldier to another. "Keep leading with your heart, Captain. The Army needs it more than it admits." I returned the salute, my throat tightening. "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. "And keep the lighter. My son insists it belongs to you." I closed my hand around it. The metal was still scarred and cold, yet for the first time, it felt warm from within. Spring arrived quietly, but Vermont still held its chill. The mountains outside were the same shade of gray I'd left them years ago. My house smelled of cedar and dust, the clock ticking slow enough to make me aware of my own breathing. After Brussels, I no longer feared silence. I'd learned how to sit inside it, how to listen to what it held instead of what it lacked. I unpacked the small suitcase, placing the NATO medal on the wooden table beside a framed photo of my father, Colonel Arthur Young. His eyes in that picture were stern, distant, the same eyes that had once told me, "Mercy gets you killed. Lead with your head, not your heart." He never understood why I chose logistics instead of combat, and I never had the courage to tell him that I was tired of watching men die for pride. That night, I lit a candle and began to write, the paper trembling beneath my hand. "Dad, I used to believe you were right, that mercy had no place in command. But I was wrong. Or maybe we both were. I stopped for a woman and her child that night. I broke protocol. I thought I ruined my career. But I saved 2 lives, and something in myself I didn't know was dying. Maybe mercy doesn't get you killed. Maybe mercy saves what duty forgets. I signed it. Heather, still your soldier, and sealed it before I could change my mind. 2 weeks later, the mailman brought a letter postmarked from South Carolina. My father's handwriting wobbled across the envelope. Morgan, I read your letter twice. Didn't think I'd live long enough to say this, but you made me proud in a way I never was. I followed orders all my life, lost good men doing it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe decency is what kept us alive after all. You did right, kid. Dad. I set the letter beside the medal. 2 pieces of paper, one from a daughter's battlefield, one from a father's past, glowed in the candlelight, their warmth mingling like a salute that needed no hands, only understanding. A month later, I found myself back on the same stretch of road where everything had begun. Lithuania looked different now. The snow had melted into dark streaks of mud, and new grass was pushing through the thaw. The wind carried a softer sound, one that no longer hurt to hear. I pulled over by the bent fence and the leaning pine tree, the exact place where I had stopped the convoy. Only this time, there was life everywhere. Wooden cabins stood in neat rows, smoke rising from small chimneys. A hand-painted sign hung over the gate, House of Warmth. An older woman stepped outside, her hands rough from work. In broken English, she asked, "You were the one who stopped?" I smiled and nodded. She pointed to a small board nailed beside the entrance. A photograph was pinned there, taken from a NATO camera on the night of the storm. A small figure in uniform, half swallowed by snow. Below it, scrawled in charcoal, were the words, "She stopped." For a long time, I couldn't move. There was no blizzard now, no cold wind biting at my face, only the smell of wood smoke and the hum of people alive, because someone had paused long enough to care. I reached into my pocket and took out the lighter the boy had given me. The metal was worn smooth from the years between us. I flicked it open, and the flame leapt to life, steady, golden, unafraid. "You're safe now," I whispered into the quiet. The flame trembled in the spring breeze, then steadied again, just as it had in the snow that night. A small, defiant light, proving that compassion can survive any winter. Back in Vermont, the silence of my cabin felt different, softer, almost forgiving. I spent the morning setting things in order, giving each memory a place. The medal hung beside my father's letter and the child's drawing, the one scrawled in crooked lines and uneven color. "Thank you, hero." The caption read above a stick-figure soldier, a truck, and flakes of white drifting through the air. I traced it with my thumb, smiling at its clumsy innocence. The snow outside was loosening its grip, melting along the edges of the porch. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching sunlight slip through the last sheet of frost on the glass. The radio hummed low in the background. A news report about NATO launching a new humanitarian fund, founded by retired General Marcus Kane. I laughed quietly to myself. He had kept his word. The mailbox creaked open outside. Inside was a single envelope, the handwriting immediately familiar. "My son, Eli, from Alaska." His words were simple, written in the blunt honesty of youth. "Mom, heard about the medal. I'm proud of you. Someday, I hope I'll do the right thing, too." I read it twice, then set it beside the coffee cup. Outside, the snow was pulling back from the earth, revealing brown grass and patches of green. The season was changing, but it felt like something deeper was shifting too. Something in me finally thawed. I opened my journal and wrote the final line I had been waiting to find. In the end, it wasn't the war that changed me. It was the snow, the silence, and 2 faces that reminded me what being human meant. Closing the notebook, I watched the fire flicker in the hearth, its reflection dancing across the window. The world outside was still cold, but not empty anymore. In that hush between breaths, I whispered into the glow, to no one and to everyone who'd ever forgotten the simplest truth. Be kind when no one's watching. That's the only kind of honor that lasts. The wind outside softened. A few stray flakes fell, melting as they touched the glass. The camera of memory drifted outward, past the candle's reflection, past the snow's surrender, until the house was just a warm pulse of light in the endless white. Proof that winter, at last, had ended. 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 Had ended.